What about the junior incident in terms of what happened there, really, as opposed to what Preston was saying? Like there was a connection with the Philadelphia experiment. So they kind of jumbled it all together, and then supposedly the project was sabotaged and destroyed. What do you remember happening there?
So Larry James did an interview also with what the hell was his name? Al Bielek,
Okay.
right? And they admitted openly that the project went underground after
Right.
the junior incident.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with that stated, beforehand they were trying to say, oh, it was destroyed. Later on, Nicholas or Al, the other Nicholas basically
Hmm.
publicly started stating that it was still active later on in other interviews before he
Yeah.
passed on. So basically, what I remember is it went completely underground. They stopped using the surface area. No longer were we going to these different areas. We were just taking, we were basically getting specific kids through opening portals because we would have
Okay.
specific kids that would sit in the chair. They would open a portal. There'd be a mirror on the wall, focus on the mirror and open the mirror. And it'd be like a way to hold the portal open for the mind, and they
Hmm.
were trying to keep it under control.
Yeah.
And they would send people through, the people would come back with kids, and then they would utilize it through that process. They were still bringing kids in. They would bring them by bus, via the bus and stuff like that, still to a point, and then they just stopped doing that. And it was, we had enough kids to run the operations
Hmm.
where even if we brought in new kids, it was just, we were just taking them. We would know who these kids were specifically that had the abilities we needed. We would go and get them, whether it be from the past, the present, or the future, and then bring them through a portal and then take them back through that portal when they were done being utilized, if that makes sense. It was never, we never had to go through the process of having to go drive down to the battery, pick up the kids, work them through the processing there. It was just all brought underground. That way we had no issues with running into people anymore or whatever the circumstances were. I'm not sure specifically at that point why they made it like that, but I understand from a strategic process that it would keep less problems from happening from people seeing what we were doing.
Okay. So what you're saying is the junior incident was not the cause for them going underground.
To my recollection, what that did is that just freaked them, that scared the shit out of them because a shit ton of people got killed
Right.
via killing themselves or killing other people thinking that they were
Hmm.
these monsters that they were seeing, right? And the people that did survive it, people that basically were knocked unconscious, like a certain amount of pressure was applied where they were knocked unconscious, and then they had implanted memories put in.
And who did that? Who implanted the memories and did all this?
The altar that people keep calling Junior, that they think is an
Oh.
etheric being that was brought through the portal, but it
Oh,
wasn't brought
wow.
through. It wasn't brought through anything. It was just the altar itself.
So the altar actually went through and implanted memories of what?
Mhm.
Of what exactly?
Just basically, he implanted memories of your deepest fears, made you think that situations that were happening
Okay.
happened that way, but it didn't really actually happen that way.
Okay.
Like even when I started remembering, I had those implanted memories. I had to look past them to see what really happened.
Hmm. Okay. So how did this end? The junior story. How did this end? Did he just suddenly disappear, or?
No, it wasn't that he disappeared. It was more or less like the kid that was in the chair. Just a stop got put to it, but not in the manner that was talked about publicly. From what I remember is that after the junior incident, I'm assuming that the kid probably calmed down at some point.
Hmm.
So basically, the altar backed up
Okay.
off.
Okay. And Preston did not actually save the situation by, smashing smashing the equipment and everything to stop it.
Preston was scared shitless. Preston didn't do anything but yell at everybody else to go and put a stop to what was happening.
He said that he had an argument with, I suppose it was Jack Pruitt. He said the director of the project, whether who's going to go into the building, I guess the radar tower, to stop
Yes.
it.
So that part was real.
Uh-huh.
That person told him to go and handle it, and
Okay.
he did not. He went to me and others to tell us to put a stop to it. And really it was more or less stopping the kid from being connected to the chair.
So after all of this calmed down, what happened after that?
So after all that calmed down, there was a lot of changes that occurred.
Hmm.
Like I was saying earlier, it was all put under base where we operated under there. The same shit still was occurring. It wasn't like it put a stop to it. It's just it was still going on for a short period of time. Um, hold on one second. So it was like 1983 when the junior incident happened. That was accurate. Um, it was around, what was it, 1985 when everything shifted over and my alter Jimmy had taken over.
So how did this happen that you actually took over this operation?
Okay, from what I remember is that so we had this mind maze. So like if we were ordered to do something and we didn't fulfill that order, it got to the point where he had to utilize this maze that caused us pain in our heads, caused brain aneurysms for disobedience. Um, I remember that there were other people that were able to kind of get through the maze already, but it's like when say you're behind enemy lines and you're infiltrating an area and you got to keep up, a facade. There were people that were still kind of keeping up a facade, that they were still doing what they were supposed to. Um, there was always people trying to lessen the abuse and things like that that were
Hmm.
there that were forced into the situation. I remember going through the maze, and the AI that was in control of the project itself already had the wherewithal of what was going to occur if it kept going the route that it was going, that there would be some form of an actual rebellion because there was enough people, enough of us at that point on that base that we were fully capable of just taking it over. It would have been pretty bloody, but there was a high probability of winning. So I remember a lot of the power had gotten shut off. There were plans that were made, to shut the power off and then start systematically trying to kill as many as we could to take over whoever was in charge, take them, and basically take over the base by force. I remember being brought into a room. They caught the person that shut off the power. They brought them into the room, and they were going to deal with us. And I remember like going into other people's heads that I trusted there to help and offering to remove that if they would help me.
Mm.
So there was a group of us that were all lined up, so we were lined up like this in a row, different, there was a bunch of us and we were standing in one of the rooms. The lights really weren't on as much. They were able to get the power back on, and when they did, um, I remember I was going to go in and kill the person that was in charge. And when I walked down the hall, there were guards that were there. My alter didn't think he was going to make it anyways, but it was just, what do you do at that point when you're just done with shit that was occurring? So it's like most of us were already ready to die at that point. So I just remember walking down this hallway. It was on sub-level 11. You had walked down the hallway. At the end of the hallway, there was a room that was the office where Jack Pruitt was in. I was going into that office, and at that point, the AI had already talked to him and informed him, to let me interface with it. I remember there was like a bunch of what it looked like hard drives, but he had basically been open about the fact that it was an AI that was in charge. So I remember interfacing with this AI, and I remember when I was talking back and forth with it, I was telling it that I could, I would just destroy it, and it was telling me that I had X amount of percentage rate of success and X amount that would fail, and it basically told me that I'd probably fail more than I would succeed. But I remember just saying, well, I can just destroy whatever you're talking through right now and just do what I can, and that there's a possibility I could win. And it basically, I made a deal with it that I wouldn't kill these people, these specific people that were in charge, and it would allow me to take over. So I made that deal with this AI.
Okay.
When I did make that deal, basically Jack Pruitt was left in the office. I walked back into the training room that was on sub-level 11. I informed everybody what was happening. I didn't go into the whole extent that there was an AI that was in charge and all that stuff. I just was brief. Some of the people that were in there helped me basically go and grab Albelik, um, and grab Cameron and grab Preston. And when we took them all separately, basically, and part of that deal was is that I could I could remove them, but I couldn't kill them as long as they left willingly.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember we took the area by force. There was another person that was in charge over me, and that person got his ass beat like really bad. He was one of us, um, because he basically thought he was going to take over,
Okay.
and we weren't going to let that happen. Um, he didn't want to stop the process of how it was all going. So he ended up getting his ass beat by one of the people. They just went up. One of the people went over, beat him, like just beat him down really bad. He put him in the infirmary. Basically, the level of his beating put him in the infirmary. We took Preston, wiped his memories of everything, put him back in his normal life, and left him where he was. When it came to Al Bielek, he was who he was beforehand. The way Jimmy dealt with him is they took him and his brother up to the top of the service because there was an area originally where they would have us dump kids.
Mm.
And when we went up there, and this was the ones that were highly irradiated from the chair, like they didn't survive, and the Draco wouldn't eat them basically. So a lot of them had been dumped there. So when we were talking to them, I remember basically Al's alter. He was like, "We're not gonna leave." He wanted to still try to be in charge. And I remember one of the individuals handing me a gun that was with me. I took the gun, I cocked it, I put it in his face, and I basically said, "You have two options." And he was like, he tried to ask what the two options were, and I was like, either you're going to do what I tell you, or I'm going to shoot you in the head, and I'm going to throw you in the ditch with all the rest of the kids that you murdered. And when I had said that, I was being sincere and serious, and he understood it. So when we were able to take him, I remember putting him in a different, basically we put him in a different life. So he wasn't allowed to remember. Stripped him of his memories, put him in a different life, took him back in time. He was in a whole different family from his brother. So that's why all that shit occurred with that. And that's why he had memories of being that person, but he never was that person in the here and now.
And you put him back where? In the here and now?
Yeah, he was basically put back as a child, relived his whole life as Al Bielek instead of who he originally thought he originally was.
Okay.
This is why when he met his brother, person that was originally his brother, he recognized him. Just like the other issue was who his father originally was, and how that would have caused a problem for the program if we put him back. So that was another issue of why things were done to the way they were.
Okay.
Because a lot of people that were on that base wanted to kill them.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, it was like Jimmy hadn't fully taken over. It was a change in management, but the way that the shit was changed, it became chaos there. Once everybody found out that they weren't in charge, it became, everybody was out for themselves situation. You had different people that were deciding that they were going to take over.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that was the process that happened. And they were dealt with in that manner. Larry James, who that's not his real name, as he admitted, he was the one who would put us in the chair and stuff like that. So I remember still having interactions with him. He did what he said. He did put his soul into one of the dead bodies and took the fuck off shortly after we took over. Because I remember threatening him at gunpoint several times because a lot of us didn't like him anyways.
What you mean is he transferred himself into a dead body that was killed by someone?
He utilized technology that we had on the base to transfer his soul into one of the bodies that had no soul in it because it was freshly dead.
Okay. Yeah.
And he took over that person's life.
And took off.
Yeah. Basically, because he was able to leave the base. And I remember having interactions with one of the people that was over Jack Pruitt and having an argument with him because Jack Pruitt had taken off when we went to go remove him from the base. He went through one of the portals. Mm-hmm. He ran into the area with the chair. There was a kid that he had placed in there, forced him to open, basically ordered him to open one of the portals. And because he was the director that was operating the base at the time, they followed orders. So they opened a portal. And as soon as we found out, we were able to find him right when he walked through the portal. Like I remember my alter running through the portal.
Oh, okay.
But he ended up escaping. He took a box of files, about this one box. It had some files with it, and it also had some kind of tech with it as well. I don't
Okay.
remember fully what he took yet.
So this was a real revolution there. Okay. So you were going to remove him, but not kill him, but he was afraid of being killed, I guess. Yes.
Well, yeah, because a lot of us still wanted to kill him. He used
Okay.
to, like, when he was there on base, like,
Uh-huh.
he would rape people that we cared about, because
Okay.
we were twin together. He would rape our trauma twins in front of us. He would, just to assert dominance and show us who was in charge there. Like, he would do crazy fucked up shit to all of us. So a lot of
Okay.
us, like a lot of people that were there were pissed because Preston wasn't executed. You have to understand that all these people that served there, a lot of them wanted this dude dead, you know? So that was just a major factor. They were pissed that we didn't
No.
execute a lot of these people. But after all that had happened, people realized that there was no real structure at that time. So they just started, it was like I said, it was just crazy. Like, people started, you know, taking over and trying to carve out areas on the base, in the underground base where they were trying to be like, de facto warlords, because a lot of these people were trained to do stuff like this. So we had people that thought that they should be in charge, and there were rape gangs that would go through and like grab women, men, it didn't matter. You'd have rape gangs that would go through. A lot of the women would group up so that they wouldn't be grabbed, during that time frame where there was a lot of chaos. It took a long time where, we would have to catch these people when they were either alone or really small numbers, and basically either grab them and beat them into submission or kill them. There were certain people that got killed for that. And it was like really bloody. That was the worst part, is we ended up having to kill or, beat a lot of these people up that were just like us because they wanted control of the base.
Okay. So your Jimmy made a deal with this AI. Like, why didn't he destroy it or try to like stop the project altogether? Was that not an option? It was not possible?
At that point, he really didn't feel that it was a possibility. It
Okay.
was more like it was put in a situation where he had all these guards that were still on the base that, there was a possibility of not being able to kill enough of them to take over anyways,
Okay.
versus making a deal with this AI and having an opportunity to where things could be changed, in increments, by removing the most vile people that were in charge. There was a lot of different things that occurred. Like I said, it's like then we had the fallout of everybody realizing that there was no leadership there. So you had all these people trying to take over. And that took a little bit of time to finally address that situation. There were people that followed me, and there were people that would try to follow these people, because they wanted to have their form of how they would address stuff. Once Jimmy actually was able to finally get rid of a lot of these individuals and get the rest of them in line, a lot of stuff changed. Like basically there were rooms specifically, like levels specifically for the kids to be on that were being brought in. The rape situation was put to a stop for the most part. Like when it came to the children, that was put to a stop. There were still pockets where people would group up and try to rape people, but it was like more secretive because it got to the point where once those things were put in place, that was being changed permanently. You had people, I had people that decided that they would go, after talking with them, that because I was busy doing other shit, that they would go and they would track these people down. They would find out, they would investigate situations where people were raped still and grab them. So what we would originally do to put a stop to that is we would go in, we would find out who did it, grab them, drag them off. People wouldn't even know that they had basically, a lot of people were in the impression that they were just sent home.
Okay.
But they weren't. They were dragged off. They disappeared for about 2 weeks. We beat them on a repetitive basis for these 2 weeks to teach them that, this is what happened because you did this. And then if you do it again, we'll execute you. And they were put back. They were told to keep their mouth shut, and they'd be left alone as long as they didn't continue that process. Some people did. So they were dragged back. There was an area where there was like a prison bars in one of the rooms. They'd be dragged back, execute them. And I was a part of the beginning stages of that until later on it was passed on to some other people that would do it. But basically a lot of the newer kids and stuff like that didn't know any of that stuff because they involved in any of that. All the older kids that were a part of the projects that I was a part of during that time frame, they were all basically kept away from the kids until those kids were old enough and they had ended up hitting like the age, I think it was like 17 when we would put them into the general population with the rest of us, and they were treated a lot different than we were, which caused a little bit of division too. But that was, that's just nature,
Could you let them go entirely? I mean, to just let
So
you
what had occurred is once Jimmy had taken over and was able to solidify control, he brought people in that were originally there and offered them the people that he served with, offered them the opportunity to go back home. Part of that opportunity is their memories would be wiped of the situation that they were a part of, and they would be put back into their lives. There was somebody that basically would take them, because a lot of them were phone bodies, at the time. So it's like basically their clones would be killed, they would be put back in their normal bodies and sent home. But I do remember like them being brought into that office later on, one by one. He went one by one, and I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head about how decided to leave, but I know that it was like there was only maybe 168 or 186 of us left at that point after that chose to stay behind.
Okay.
The rest decided to leave. And then we found out later about the trauma twinning situation, which once people figured that out, that was made known to the general population of the remaining people that stayed. They were devastated because then they had all these memories that came back from who that person was to them, because not everybody knew that. There was only specific people that knew that. But so there was a whole different change to how operations were ran. The kids were still trained the same way in combat. They were still put through the same process, but it was the rape factor was stripped out of it. A lot of people remember that.
Okay. So you were in charge of the program at the base? Who was above you somewhere else? Because I guess the program was run from above.
We would get money funding from the people that were in charge of the actual program itself. So we would have our AI, we would have military funding. Then we would have the funding we would have to get a hold of through stealing stuff and, through time, whatever we could steal that wouldn't change stuff too drastically, that people wouldn't remember it being there or whatever, whether it be gold or whatever artifacts we needed that we could make money off of. Through that, the funding, we started needing money because it took a little while, but we had food shortages and stuff like that. And I do remember dealing with different Joint Chiefs of Staff. They were the ones that we went to. A lot of them, they found out what happened, they backed out. They didn't want to be part of what was going on. They were actually scared. And there was some that decided to still work with us, and we ended up working through a liaison. So at the time, the person that was the director at the time, I've already publicly mentioned. I don't really care to keep going over that, but that person was who we dealt with.
The general.
He did not want to work with us after he found out what happened. He tried to back out of it, and we didn't really want to work with him anyways. But later on, I ended up going through different Joint Chiefs of Staff around that time frame to try to deal with them, because that time when Jimmy took over was around 1985-ish. So in our time. So it was like we were dealing with people from 1985 at that time.
How did you connect with them? Did you call them or?
So we had a TV, like we have our computers now, but we had a TV that's set in the office, and it would basically work like what we're doing right now. It was the same process. It was like
teleconference. Yeah,
it was like a teleconference. Sometimes it would be heated conversations. Sometimes people threatened us. It didn't really work out that well for them when they did. But aside from that, it was like I just remember working with the Air Force. One of the Joint Chiefs of the Air Force had offered to work with us. He sent us. He had us contact a liaison, and we worked with that liaison to get food and equipment, clothing, and stuff like that. We let them know what we needed. And I remember it was the Air Force because I also remember later on that they sent some of the newer uniforms for the kids later on that had come through under the new program, uniforms with the Air Force logo. And we were like, why are you doing this? Like, You know, they have to go out on missions. Like, this is stupid. You don't want to have these logos on there.
Right.
You know, and they're like, oh no, they don't. You know, I remember Jimmy arguing with them, and he ended up getting them taken off. But it was kind of an awkward situation, you know, because it's like we're running our own project, and you don't want to be tied to that project. Like, it's not a smart move.
Okay,
you know?
so for Jimmy, it was still relevant to keep the program going. It was relevant for them to continue what was being done, right? And
Well, yeah, because we were just left on the base, you know, that we couldn't really leave per se. I mean, we could have left, but we were trained to kill people.
right.
You know what I mean? We were trained to kill people and infiltrate.
Yeah,
we weren't
different
trained
mindset.
to work at we weren't trained to work at McDonald's. Like, there weren't really good job options, you know.
Okay,
what are you going to do?
Right.
You know.
So you basically went rogue in a way, but okay, I want to ask about this AI thing. Did it control did it telepathically command everybody what to do at the base, or
no? So what would happen is when I took over, I would interface with this AI. It would have a thing to talk through me. Like, I didn't talk to it telepathically, so I don't know where that came from. But when I talked to the AI, it relies like one of the computer structures, like one of the CPUs or something like that, to talk through it. So it had some way to voice its voice, but it wasn't like anything. Like, it was clear enough you could understand it.
Okay.
You know, but it was very robotic.
Okay.
If that makes sense. You know.
Interesting. So it wasn't telepathic like what you would expect
I
from
don't. I don't personally remember ever having any telepathic communication. I would just be sitting in the office communicating with it one-on-one. It would give me its directives of what it wanted, which wouldn't have anything to do with what the military wanted, unless it coincided with what it wanted me to do.
Okay.
You know.
And what did it want?
I mean, it was all about self-preservation. You know, it wanted protection for itself. It didn't really make that clear until, you know, later on when Jimmy started to understand how it was operating. But when it gave us directives to change things, those things that were changed benefited us at the time, because it just wanted to make sure that it could keep itself safe.
Okay.
It wasn't, things didn't start happening for the negative for us until after that AI talked Jimmy into transferring it to the Cheyenne Mountain location, which is where our American military
Space Force.
It's the most defended area that we have in our country. So, you know, it was able to get itself transplanted there. When that process was happening, the people that were running the actual the people that were actually running what's known as the Stargate project, not the other one that's public, but the Stargate project that they made a TV series about. People that were running that, there's a lot of differences from the TV the TV series, what they were really doing there, but they had me send people that were on the base to that location, you know, through a portal to that location, and they utilized those people. They utilized different altars that they had. They surfaced a different altar to work in that project, to the point that Jimmy, I have memories of Jimmy, basically the base he was on was practically empty until he started complaining about it because he couldn't continue to run operations like he was. And he was able to get most of his people back.
Okay, we have about 1 minute. Can you tell, like, we'll do probably the next one next week. What were the Draco doing when this whole transfer of power happened?
So in 1985, I think from what Jimmy told me, it would be like June 20th. And this time frame was around the time that we ended up having, like, Jimmy had altercations with these Draco, and they kept wanting us to feed them, and we didn't want to keep feeding people to them. Like, that was becoming an issue, and they were complaining about it, and it was getting to the point where they were making threats to us. And me and others who remember, we ended up basically hoarding them into certain areas on different levels of the base, mainly the main feeding area that they had. They basically went in there. We offered them, you know, kind of like gave them an offer to, like, stop doing what they were doing. They didn't like the offer that we offered. So when that happened, you know, basically we caught them off guard and we killed as many as we could throughout the base. And then once we killed the majority of them, we just basically went through and swept up the remainder.